So I'm going to discuss something I think a lot of parents are not going to like or maybe be upset about. And that's this. I think most of your kids are not ready to play club basketball. They don't have the skills or the IQ necessary or the athleticism or just are not in shape to play the game at a high level. Okay, let's talk. So, Coach White here with SFBA Sports Performance. So, I hit you with why I think your kid is not ready to play club basketball. You're like, but that's not my kid, and this conversation is not for you. This conversation is for a few people. One, it's for the parent who maybe has not dipped themselves into this community yet and don't really know what it's about. And I'm going to suggest that you do a really strong evaluation of where you feel like your kid is, and then from there determine if you feel like it's the best choice to sign up for a tryout or have your kid play on a competitive club team. Number two, it's for the family whose kid does play competitive club basketball or does play club basketball, has been on a team that is a club team, has played in tournaments, but you're not getting that much playing time. You're a little bit frustrated at their development. You feel like the coaches don't give them as many minutes as you'd like to, and you're wondering if this circle is worth going around again, and if you're wasting your time. So that's what I'm talking to. If your kid's already thriving in club basketball, playing at a high level, and doing all the right things, then this is just a good conversation for you, but it's not necessarily meant for you. So hopefully this is meant for the right family. Number one, let me kind of give you my definition of what club basketball is. It's for the best players to play against the best teams. That's it. It's meant to be a showcase for players and teams to compete at high levels, to give really good players a chance to compete against other really good players. And it's not really meant for development in that way. Yes, players can develop, they can learn, we can get better through practice and repetition and instruction from coaches. That's our job. But it's meant and designed for a specific kind of player, not really the beginner player. However, because there are so many teams out there and so many different levels now in terms of different programs and whatnot, it can really feel like it's more like recreation. And in some cases, for some players, it can be, a helpful tool for kids that are just starting out, but they probably have certain other attributes like they're really tall, or they're really fast, or they pick things up really well. So it's really about the individual player and kind of where they are and what they have. But overall, I would say it's not really meant for the beginner player to just start learning the game of basketball. I think if you use it that way for a lot of kids, it just becomes one of the worst experiences that can ever face and one of the worst investments you can ever make with your money. So I will say that first of all. A lot of kids come to our tryouts and they're just not ready. Like I see kids every year come to tryouts and I have to say no to most of the families because their kids are just not ready in any way, shape, or form. Whether it's their skills, their knowledge of the game, physically they're not in shape, or their mindset and their temperament. All of that can play into it, or maybe some of it, but a lot of kids just aren't ready yet. And I think it can kind of be misleading when parents look at their kids play basketball at the recreation level for like a rec league for their school or CYO, and they assume AU basketball is kind of like that, right? You might look at the best team in your rec league and think, yeah, that's as good as it gets at this age. But if you haven't really watched high-level club basketball teams or been to a tournament and seen really good teams, you may have a false sense of where you feel like your kid is. You might think that your kid is good enough against this competition and assume all competition is like that. And then you see a really good team and you realize, yeah, my kid's not even close. Like they have no chance to play against these kids. And so I think if you're able to realize that, it really helps you determine what direction to go. Should we try out for a team? Should we accept this roster invite from a team that we tried out for? Or should we just dedicate more time to helping them get better in terms of their training, developing, finding a trainer, going to training programs, or just getting them in shape, or whatever it happens to be that your kid specifically needs? So when it comes down to this, I think this conversation is important because there's several outcomes I think every parent wants. You want your kid to gain more confidence. You want your kid to be developed by a competent coach, someone that can do the job, help them reach a new level of play. And you also want your kid to play against better competition because you believe that's needed for them to see where they're at, but also to really test their skills in a healthy way. The problem with that is confidence comes from competence. If your kid is not ready to play, they're going to be so far behind. Whatever the coach is teaching is going to be so outside of their skill sets or understanding. They're going to feel like they're just not good enough. And the coach won't be able to utilize them when it comes down to games. And then you'll be upset because then your kid's not getting playing time. You think you wasted all this money. But in reality, you made the choice to put him in this environment, and now the coach has to do what's best for the team. You look at it from the individual standpoint as that's your child. Like the other kids really aren't your priority. So whenever your kid doesn't get something that you feel like they should get or that they deserve, you take it as personal. When in reality, you put them in an environment they weren't ready for. I think we all understand if your kid got straight C's in high school and they applied to Stanford, you probably know they're not going to make it. And when you get the rejection letter, you probably understand why, and you were ready for it. But I think because a lot of parents don't understand what club basketball is really meant for and don't understand the level of competition your kid's going to face, you tend to take it as like it's not fair versus that's expected. Yeah, my kid didn't get that much playing time today because he's or she's not one of the best players on the court, and nothing that they can do is really going to help the team in this situation. As coaches, we don't want to sit players all day. We do want to find opportunities for them to get on the court and feel like they're contributing. But I tell families and players all the time, like, I'm going to do what's best for the team. My focus on game day is how do I help this team reach a level of success? And typically that's with the wins. In practices, we're focusing on everybody, right? I want every player to understand what's going on, learn the plays, improve their skill sets, find ways to help them take another step forward in practice. But game days are the test. And if your kid steps onto the court and they give an opportunity and they're not meeting the expectations, I have to substitute them with players that are able to play through that level of competition to give us a chance to be successful. And if you're joining a team environment, I think a lot of people need to understand that it's not personal. It's not about your kid or against your kid. It's your kid wasn't doing something that helped the team in this circumstance. And as your kid continues to get better, hopefully they continue to earn more playing time because the things that they do are meaningful to the team's success. But I think because people jump from team to team, they play on all these different teams and they just see teams as just development tools only. And the whole idea of team really gets lost. They forget that with playing on a team comes a certain sense of sacrifice. Understanding you're not going to get all the playing time. You will have to set more screens for your better shooters. You will have to make better passes. You will need to find other ways to contribute versus just scoring, like diving on the floor, boxing out, getting back in transition defense. And I think a lot of times people don't look at the extra stuff that's necessary for kids to be successful and immediately go to it's not fair, or because my kid didn't get to shoot all the time, now they're losing confidence, when you're not looking at it from an X's and O's perspective. And so hopefully this conversation allows you to think of it from the X's and O's in the game and not like a personal thing. Tryouts are fast-paced. They're evaluations. They're a job interview. Coaches want to see your kid can perform certain skills under certain circumstances. And if they can't, they're probably not going to make a team. If your kid happens to make a team, let's be honest about this. I tell a bunch of families their kids are not going to be invited to one of our teams. And oftentimes what happens is they just go try out for several other teams until someone says yes. And then I'll see those same kids play. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes they found a team where they were able to figure it out and, they were able to grow. And cool, I'm not saying it can't work out. But what I'm saying is I see more kids than not, not get selected for a team, go somewhere else, get selected. But in reality, the concerns that I had for selecting the player are still there. They're not going to get a lot of playing time because they're not that good yet. And so you're going to spend all this money. You're just going to take the invite because someone said, yes, we'll take you. But in reality, your kid just fills a roster spot, so that team has enough players. And number two, it just adds revenue to that program. But there's no real method or process for your kid getting better. Some teams do have multiple teams at different grade levels. Like we don't. We have two of our grade levels have two teams. We have two ninth grade teams and two seventh grade teams. And there are some programs where they have, like 4 or 5 teams at every grade level. They'll have like select team and then like the regular team and then a good team and then the kind of good team and then the not so good team and then the development team. And then they'll have a spot for everybody. I believe if each one of those steps are realistically set up to help players develop to get to the next step, I think that's fine. But I think at times what tends to happen from what I hear from most parents is if their kid made like the development team, what happens is they're not getting the best coach in the program, obviously. Those are usually going to the better teams. The instruction isn't the best. The teammates they have aren't super motivated. Most of those kids, if they haven't put a lot of work in now, they're not going to. And so the kids that do want to put in work, they're surrounded by kids that aren't that hardworking. So it's kind of a poor experience for them as a whole. And there really is little room for them to grow. I would say if your kid gets invited to play on like a development or lower level team, and that program has like higher level teams, I would say, hey, which of the parents on your higher level teams were on these development teams? and how many of them were able to find a level of success to get up to these higher level teams. And I'd like to know their experience. If there is a clear path set up by the program for kids to move from these development teams in a program to the higher level teams, and there's a clear track record and a process in place, and parents and players have seen it, felt it, experienced it, and thrived in it, then I say, yeah, go ahead. But if that's not the case, I think what's happening most of the time is we're just making room for kids to be on a team any way possible versus looking at real ways for those kids to step up to a higher level. And let's face it, there aren't enough teams for everybody. Like, you can't, there's only so many spots on higher level teams. If every kid was really getting better, then where would they play, right? And there'd be this shift all the time. But I think if that were to work out in a perfect world, then yeah, like playing on a development team could be helpful. But from most of the families I've talked to who have been on teams or programs like that, and it hasn't been the best experience, and their kids haven't gotten better. And it's led to more frustration than anything else. And so what I would say to that is really ask questions, ask that program, talk to families who have gone through the process and have had some level of success, and then see if that's realistic enough to where you feel like it works for you and your kid. If not, I would say hold off on the tryouts and save your money. But if it does work, then I would say, yeah, move forward with it. I think the hard truth here is that a lot of kids think they're better than they are. They don't understand. I see so many kids, and it's not really funny. It's just kind of like surprising, even now, that I'll see a kid that isn't that good at basketball, and then I'll tell them, yeah, I don't think you're ready yet. And then they'll look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, okay, you can disagree with me. You can maybe not appreciate my comment and whatnot, but I'm trying to be as honest as possible. And hopefully what you do is you take that information and that feedback and you utilize it to make yourself better in the areas I think you need to improve. That doesn't happen as often as I wish it would. I think a lot of people take it as personal and they just assume that it's, oh, he didn't believe in me, or he doesn't think I'm good enough, or he never gave me a chance. When I really believe in every kid's ability to get better. I think every human being has a chance to improve themselves, their lives, and their circumstances. I think that at times we tend to fall into the trap that we feel like we've made it, or if somebody tells you you're not good enough at something, it's now a personal attack versus feedback for areas of growth to improve. And if we looked at basketball that way more so, I think you'd have a lot more kids that would dial into the specific areas they need to improve on to get ready to play or try for a team. Or if you're not playing much on the team, improve in the areas where you need to try to get more playing time in the season that you have left. But I think when I see a lot of kids, they can't handle the ball under pressure. They don't make the right decision all the time because they're not sure where to go and things happen too fast. They can't think clearly. Their conditioning is horrible. They're out of shape. They're trying to play against good athletes, and you're not an athlete yourself. Defensive effort is poor because you don't understand that basketball is not just about you scoring. It's about how you defend as well and the rules and roles around that. And practice versus game experience is very different. Practice is where you learn. Games are where you get to utilize the skills that you've learned. I think too many people feel like games are where you learn everything. And while you can learn things in games, the practice is where you really pick up all the information. The games are just a reflection of what you understand and what you know and how you perform under pressure. But when these kids and families have their kids play on a million teams so they can keep playing more games, I think you are completely wrong. And I will say that all day. I completely disagree with any parent who says my kid needs more games to get better. If your kid's struggling in games, putting them in more games 99% of the time is not going to make them better. If they got better, it's because either they found a coach that can help them, they dialed down their training, they took it more seriously in their development, and then in the games that you see them succeeding in, it's because they're more prepared. Not because they played in more games and just figured it out. That typically doesn't happen. If anything, playing in more games for a player that isn't that great just leads to more frustration, lack of confidence, and more frustration on your part, and ends up being something you feel like is just a complete waste of money. I think there's a lot of contradictions that parents have. You want your kids to improve. You get upset at the coaches when they don't play your kids. But most of the time, parents who tend to come up to me and are upset about playing time are not the parents of kids who dedicate enough time to get better outside of practice. They're the ones who typically miss a lot of practices. They're the ones who tend to miss a lot of games. They're the ones who kids do not get in the best shape. They're the ones who kids do not work on their skills outside of practice. However, they expect nearly the same treatment that the better kids get. And I don't mean like in terms of like favoritism. I mean in terms of playing time or utilization. If a kid has been working on his shooting and he's a better shooter than your kid and he's been working on it more so consistently, that kid is probably going to be more prepared to take more shots and make more shots in games. My job is to try to set up players and put them in positions to utilize their skill sets in a way that makes it useful in games. If your kid doesn't work on shooting and can't shoot the ball properly, like the chances that they're going to be a high volume shooter in a game and make them consistently is low. So you have to ask yourself, what are you doing to make sure your kid is fully prepared for those moments? So if you're demanding that your kid gets more shots or more minutes, do they have the skill sets necessary to where those things can make an impact in the game? If you're not doing the things necessary outside of practice to make sure they're prepared, then I think some of that has to be on you and your realistic approach to what they deserve versus like thinking it's unfair. So if you want your kid to get more playing time or earn a roster spot, you have to really think about, are they doing things to make sure they're fully prepared to compete against the best players out there? If you're not doing that, then I think you need to reevaluate even stepping into this world to begin with. And I don't think that's something a lot of people are willing to let go of. I think if you really look at your kid and say, hey, my kid can hang with the best players out there, then cool, this conversation is not for you, like I said. But if you're looking at your kid and you're like, yeah, my kid is not able to do this that well, this and this, cool, now you have an idea of what they should work on, but are you taking the time to make sure that they do that consistently? And if you're not, then I have to ask, like, what's the point? Because you're just going to end up blaming the coach in the program and thinking they didn't help your kid, when in reality, there were steps on your part that also needed to be taken. What ready really looks like. If your kid's getting ready and they're trying out for a team, I think what ready looks like is a player believes they're one of the best players in the gym during tryout. They put in real work. And I know my vision of real work is different, maybe different than yours, but real work basically means you've dialed in and looked at their weaknesses on the court. You've looked at the skill sets that are required for them to play competitive basketball. You've put together a plan, either with yourself or a trainer or some coach, that your athlete can do on a daily or in weekly basis, consistently enough, with enough volume to where it can lead to meaningful growth in those areas. And you've been able to have them do things like go to open runs or go to parks or go to open gyms and play against other players to see if these skill sets are actually working and if they're making real gains. If you're not doing that, you're just hoping. But what's going to happen is you're going to place that hope onto somebody else who's trying to help your kid, like myself. Like, again, I work with kids all the time. And it's tough because you want every kid to be successful, but every kid comes into it different. That's just why I tell families, if I don't realistically think I can play your kid and give them meaningful minutes, I don't want to take them. Not because I don't think they can get better. I know what the story is going to end like when I don't give your kid a ton of minutes because they're not ready. I'm going to do as much as I can to coach them, but if I'm still teaching your sixth grader how to make a layup, when all my other players know how to do that, or your kid keeps getting beat on defense, or your kid makes poor decisions on the court, we're trying to fix those things in practices and help them with those things. But if there's such a learning curve that they're far behind, and you still want them to compete to at least near the same degree as other players, just because you drove a certain distance, I think that's highly unfair. And so if you want your kid to get out there, putting in real work to get ready for a tryout, I think is essential. Our tryouts are going to be in mid-July for our fall teams that play in September and October. And so I tell our families up front, I send emails out about that hopefully they're reading that and saying, okay, we have from April 10th until July 11th or 12th. Oh, my baby's crying. I'm sorry. So July 11th or 12th to get ready. That's a good amount of time to make some real growth and improvement. I highly doubt most parents are going to take the time to do that. They're going to already come up with a bunch of reasons why they don't have the time to get their kids there. And by the time they get there, their kids are going to be the same, while other players have either gotten better or the gap was just too far. And I'm going to get an email asking, hey, I want to find out if my kid made the team. And I can already tell you no. And there's going to be a sense of disappointment. So I highly plead with families, like, if you're going to get your kid into this world and you're really considering trying out for an AAU program and or your kid plays for a team and they're not getting a bunch of minutes, and you're kind of tired of seeing them just sit on the bench all the time, there has to be a sense of responsibility to put on families as well. And like, are you doing everything necessary to give your kid a chance to reach your expectations? Because if you're just placing that on the coach solely, coaches were in charge of helping kids get better at basketball, obviously, but there has to be a realistic approach to it. And I don't think everybody understands that, and that tends to lead to negative interactions between coaches and families. So if you wonder why I'm always talking about parents, that's typically why usually. But do your homework about programs. Figure out what they do. What does a program offer? What is the quality of the coaches there? What's their team philosophy? What's the track record of development? Do their values match yours? Do they prioritize development or just winning? Again, like I said, I want players to develop. I have a third grade team that I coach in a sixth grade team. Our program has third through ninth grade. We don't have a fourth grade team this year. But for my third grade team, my practices are different than my sixth grade team. For my sixth graders, I've had about half of them since they were in third grade. So there's a certain level of knowledge and skill set that they possess that I don't need to go over and spend time on. For my third grade team, I am dialing it back a lot more to the basic fundamentals, finishing at the rim, layups, change of directions, how we develop our team defense in a man-to-man setting. All these things, they're developing the mindset that we want them to have in terms of competition because most haven't faced it yet. So my method of practice is very different than for my third grade team than it is for my sixth grade team. And so there is a higher prioritization on development versus winning for them. On game day, obviously I am focused on making sure I do things to help the team reach a level of success. In practice, I am all into helping us build as a team and helping each individual player. But when it comes to game day, I coach the games. I don't track minutes. I don't see who's played more or less. I look at the situations and base my coaching off of that and which of my players are able to help our team within those situations. For my sixth grade team, it's even more so. Their expectations are up there. I know that if our team doesn't win games and we're not as successful, I probably have players that are already thinking, I might need to leave, at the end of the season and play for somebody else, which is fine. I get that. That happens in every program. But I understand that if our team doesn't win, people will lose. I understand that if our team doesn't look like it's reaching a level of success, players already talk to different coaches, parents talk to other coaches. They're secretly, determining who they might want to play for at the end of the season. And for me, again, I get it. Do I like it? Maybe not, but I understand it. I know that if our team isn't being successful, then I'm going to lose a lot of my good players. So I have to make sure now that we understand the game of basketball better, I'm still reinforcing our concepts offensively and defensively, but I'm going to put our team in a position to where I feel like each game that we play, we have a chance to win. And at the end of the day, like I said, it's the best players versus the best teams. I want to put our best players out there versus the best teams out there. And my hope is that all of my players are the best players that they can be so they can all contribute. But I will not sacrifice the chance for our team to be successful because the kid didn't get that many minutes today. It's on him or her to step up to the level that we expect her or him to play at. And it's on me to help them through the process of practices and workouts to make sure that they learn the skills necessary. So the truth about development teams, like I said, if your kid is going to play for a team and they're playing on some development team, that could help or it could not. I don't know. I don't do that. I think if you have a development team, it's hard because you look at what's the real goal. If it's purely on development and they're really grinding into it and they're doing all the right things, then yeah, I think it helps. I don't think most of them do, though, from the conversations I've had with families that have been in stuff like that. I think if it can be a stepping stone towards a higher level team and there's a clear process to do that and there's clear evidence because other families on higher level teams were on those lower level teams and have gotten better, then cool. Like I said, I think it's great. But if anything, I think it's just another added revenue stream. It's another team leads to more money, and then more money leads to more revenue and more profit for a lot of teams. We don't have that because we don't have the resources to do that like some programs do. We're not the biggest program, we're not the smallest one, but we take up to 8 or 9 teams per season, and we don't have enough coaches to have 5 or 6 teams for every grade level. Most of our grade levels are just one team. Our 9th grade and our 7th grade teams have 2 teams each, but that's because we have the resources to do that, and that's as far as we can stretch. But I would ask, who's going to coach these teams? What do they do? What do they teach? Let me talk to other parents who have had this guy as a coach. What has been their experience? Is there a real pathway to higher teams? And again, our practice is intentional, or do we feel like it's just random scrimmages all day? If there's no real pathway, I say don't do it. But if you clearly believe that there is, and you're convinced with what you're being told and what you've seen, then I would say then do it. But it has to be meaningful. And I think number one, what families should be doing instead is number one, before trials, get honest evaluation on your kids. Train consistently and with a purpose. Play in the right environments. I definitely think there's a lot of opportunities for kids to play competitive basketball, and ease into it. I think rec leagues are great. I think CYO, Boys and Girls Club, all that stuff, the YMCA, they still host leagues. And I think if your kid is training, it's still a good way for them to go out there and play within a certain constraint of competition that maybe isn't the hardest yet, but still allows them to play in a constructive environment. It's where they can test out their skills and see if their body's getting faster and stronger and quicker, and if they're making improvements there. I think that's a healthy way to do it. Focus on skill development, confidence through preparation. Like the more your kid understands the game, the more they trust their skills and their knowledge, the more confident they become, not because you just threw them into the fire. And then think about long-term growth. I think too many families expect things to be quick. And it's almost like if you were to spar, like in jiu-jitsu, you sparred someone that's been training in jiu-jitsu for the last 8 years, and you started doing it for 6 months, you're supposed to get beat up. Like, you're supposed to get beat up. Like, I don't know if anybody's ever been in that world before or knows anything about it, but yeah, if you're out there and you're sparring somebody who's been doing this for years and they're pretty competent at it, you could work as hard as you can for 6 months. You're still supposed to get beat up. So I think when we look at basketball and we're playing competitive basketball, players will struggle if they're not fully prepared to play at this level. That's why I think it's important to make sure your kid at least has a decent chance of being successful and contributing to a team before you decide to say, hey, let's go for a tryout. Closing message is this. This was a little bit longer than I expected, but hopefully it makes sense. The goal is to inspire and challenge. It's okay not to be ready yet, but it's not okay to ignore what it takes. Encourage patience and discipline. This is not a sprint. And because you might see other kids your kid's age play at a higher level, I think it's unfair to compare your kid to that and say, my kid needs to be this guy today. Understand that kid could just be physically gifted, could just be faster just because, could be quicker just because. Genetics is a real thing. Kids are taller, kids are shorter, kids can be faster, kids can be slower. Like that's life. There are elements you can't control. However, elements you can control are looking at the areas where your kid needs to make real improvements to play against other players that are playing at a high level. If you dial it into specifics and really create a real plan or have somebody help you create a plan, then it puts you in a position to really know where your kid needs to make the right adjustments. So when you do have 4 or 5 months to get ready for a tryout, your kid can be as ready as possible. And you can have more confidence and believe that your kid is going to be one of the best players to show up in today's tryout and really have a meaningful chance to make the roster versus just becoming an extra roster spot at the end and, some more extra dollars for the program when coaches know your kid won't really get that much playing time. So there's nothing wrong with not being ready yet, but there is something wrong with skipping the process. Like, do the work. You have several months before teams have their tryouts again for the fall season. Don't waste it. And if you have excuses already, then just know that this probably isn't for you. And before you start blaming your coaches at the program and that's not fair, think about the real amount of time you allowed your kid to put in or the resources you provided. I'm not saying you have to spend thousands of dollars on trainers, but if you went to the park 30 minutes a day and worked on shooting and ball handling with your kid, they would get immensely better, 4 or 5 months from now. And that's free. And that's quality time you and your kid can spend together. But you have to dedicate it and figure out how to make it work. You can't rely on the fact that you don't have time as the excuse to get something when you have put work into it. When I say you, I mean players and families. So before you start criticizing your coaches for, not giving your kid playing time or not giving your kid a roster spot, really ask yourself, were they ready? If your kid isn't ready for club basketball, then you're asking them to be in an environment that they don't belong in yet. And again, you're coming to tryouts to be evaluated. Give us something that we can evaluate that makes sense. Otherwise, we're going to tell you no. Do the work, be honest about where you are, and when the time does come, you won't have to hope that they make a team. You already know. So hopefully this made sense. It was a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. And again, I try to stick to as much of my notes as possible. As you can tell, sometimes I diverge from that. But hopefully this made sense. It was informative. It was honest. And it provided you with some resources to think about to determine if your kid should get into playing club basketball, should you sign up for that tryout, and if you're going to, what you can probably think about doing to make sure they're fully prepared to give them the best experience possible so they can really grow in confidence and skills and also reach the level of success that you want them to gain. So with that being said, please like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. www.sfbasportsperformance.com. Instagram, same thing, SFBA Sports Performance. And feel free to let me know what you think. I'm here to help out. And Coach White, I'm out. Peace.